man who made the bombs in both the Brussels and Paris terror attacks is reportedly dead. That major development coming from intelligence sources. Meanwhile, the search is on for more suspects. Kate Parkinson is following the investigation from Brussels. Kate?
Well, this has been a major development this evening here in Brussels. They say that Najim Lashouri is dead. He allegedly blew himself up at the airport just behind me. This is particularly interesting because we've been hearing his name a lot over the past few days because he had been identified as the possible bomb maker, making not only the bombs that were used here in Brussels, but also the explosives that were used in the Paris attacks back in November. There have been other developments today as people here in Brussels tried to come to terms with what had happened. Let's take a look at my report. Brussels is a city in mourning. United in grief, people gathered to pay tribute to those who were killed and wounded in Tuesday's terrorist attacks. There is a sense of shock and sadness. But in reality, the attack could have been considerably worse. The Belgian prosecutor said a third unexploded bomb was by far the biggest device, and had that exploded, many more people could have been killed. Police have named two of the attackers as brothers Khaled and Ibrahim El Bakauri. 27-year-old Khaled blew himself up at the Malbec metro station. 29-year-old Ibrahim, seen here in the middle of this image, was one of the airport suicide bombers. The man on the left also blew himself up. The third man is on the run. Across Europe, there were expressions of solidarity for Belgium, particularly in France, which was twice the target of terror attacks last year, one of which was planned in Brussels. Tuesday's attacks may be linked. But the French Prime Minister said Belgian authorities should not be expected to shoulder the blame and that all of Europe is responsible for rising extremism.
We closed our eyes, everywhere in Europe, including France, to the progression of extremist ideas. Neighborhoods which, through a combination of drug trafficking and radical Islam, perverted, and I'll use this word again, a part of the youth. But this is what we need to do, and I'm not here to lecture the Belgians, because I'm sure they're more than aware of this.
There is a sense of determination in Brussels that life must go on, but there is also a sense that a pervasive threat of terrorism will be part of that life. This was the third terror attack in Europe in 15 months. With security services seemingly powerless to prevent them, people are acutely aware of how vulnerable they are. Well, authorities are now looking for that fourth attacker, the man you saw there in that closed-circuit security camera image from the airport. He is the only surviving attacker. Authorities believe he is on the run. Authorities desperately searching for him, and they say looking for other individuals who may have links to the group and could pose a threat. Now, as investigators continue their work, it is becoming increasingly clear that the Paris attackers did have links to the one surviving attacker from the Paris attacks, Salah Abdeslam. He was on the run for 4 months. He's now in custody here in Brussels. This does indicate that they were part of the same terror cell. We've seen traces of DNA where their paths have crossed, and certainly this does go towards mitigating the current security threat, because it does indicate that they were working together and there isn't another active terror cell here operating in Brussels at the moment. Nevertheless, security is exceedingly high, and the authorities are conducting this huge manhunt as they look for the fourth suspect.
Kate, one of the things you said, acutely aware of how vulnerable they are. So I've got to ask you about the atmosphere there. What's it like on the streets of Brussels today?
Well, there is this sense of defiance, certainly. We saw it in Paris as well when I was reporting there during the two terror attacks. There's this community spirit, this sense of determination that life must go on, that the terrorists won't defeat the people who live here. And yet that is very much mixed with this anxiety. People do feel vulnerable. As I said, 3 attacks in 15 months, and the security services don't seem able to stop them. You have to remember that ever since the Paris terror attacks, Europe has been bracing itself for further attacks. And the fact that another attack of this scale, the deadliest in Brussels history, was able to take place does make people here extremely nervous. And yet there are signs that life is getting back to normal. The public transport is running again. It was, of course, immediately shut down in the aftermath of Tuesday's attacks. And yet there are still reminders that life is far from normal. For example, the airport behind me, well, that will remain closed until at least the weekend, we're told.
Kate Parkinson, live for us in Brussels. Thanks so much.